Thanks for streaming with us on this Friday Eve. Tracking the new subvariant of Omicron spreading around the world. The World Health Organization saying it appears more contagious, but not more severe, as Moderna announces it's starting human trials of an Omicron-specific vaccine just days after Pfizer says it's doing the same. Millions of Americans along the East Coast bracing for what could be a major nor'easter this weekend, bringing heavy snow from North Carolina to Massachusetts. And the race is on to recover a downed U.S. Navy fighter in the South China Sea. The Navy dispatching salvage equipment as concerns rise over the Chinese picking apart parts of that plane. Turning now to the latest on the crisis with Russia over Ukraine. The U.S. delivering a formal written response to Russian demands as it takes measures to bolster NATO allies and Ukraine's military. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, responding, saying there is no positive reaction on the main issue of this document, but there are grounds on other issues to keep on talking. More than 100,000 Russian troops massed around Ukraine's borders right now, while Russia's defense ministry releasing more videos showing warships taking part in what it says are just drills in the Black Sea. Despite Russian denials, America's chief negotiator in talks right now with Russia, warning of the possibility of an imminent Russian attack. Ian Panel joining me live from Ukraine, along with our State Department reporter Connor Finnegan. Ian, let's start with you. It seems like we're hearing mixed messages here. Some officials say that invasion could be imminent. Others say if it happens, it could be a week or more away. Where's the disconnect, and what do you know?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Washington is certainly on a different step to the Ukrainian government, and I think to some other governments in the region who perhaps feel that the crisis is less prescient. The sense you get here in Ukraine is, yes, of course, they're aware that they're under pressure. They know that they're surrounded on at least 2 to 3 fronts by Russian troops, and they know, and they certainly think, that the Kremlin has malign intent. But what they're saying is they don't think they're quite in position to be able to launch a full-scale invasion at this point. That's not what we're hearing from Washington, who believes that that absolutely could happen. I think one of the factors here is clearly the Ukrainians have got used to the threat. You know, for them, I spoke to the foreign minister yesterday. He made a point, look, we were invaded in 2014. We're not about to be invaded. We already have been. When Russia annexed Crimea, when it backed separatists in the east of the country, in the Donbass, essentially Russia moved into the country. It has influence. It has troops on the ground in parts of Ukraine. And so, as far as they're concerned, this is more of the same, even though the tempo has increased. I think their more immediate concern is not necessarily of a military intervention, but attempts to try and sow discord and chaos in the country. If you talk to Ukrainians, certainly over the last few weeks, generally they haven't been that bothered. But now you're seeing increasing signs of certainly concern.
So, Connor, you have some new reporting about the potential for Russia to invade Ukraine during the Olympics. What have you found out?
Yeah, that's right, Kira. Who would have thought the Olympics, of all things, would really be involved in this? But that's exactly what Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman said yesterday. She's that chief negotiator that you mentioned earlier. She led the first round of talks between the U.S. and Russia earlier this month. And she warned yesterday that Vladimir Putin is ready at this moment in time to invade. She said that there is every indication that he is going to use military force sometime perhaps now and middle of February. Of course, the middle of February is when those Winter Olympics are happening in Beijing. And there is a thought here that perhaps Vladimir Putin would not want to upset his partner Xi Jinping of China by launching some kind of attack on Ukraine during the Winter Olympics. There are some precedents, though. Back in 2014, as Ian mentioned, when Russia first annexed Crimea and attacked eastern parts of Ukraine, it was the day after the Winter Olympics ended that he made that move. Those Winter Olympics hosted, of course, by Vladimir Putin, by Russia in Sochi. But years earlier, when Beijing hosted the Summer Olympics back in 2008, Putin did so. He attacked the country Georgia on the day of the opening ceremony for Beijing. And so there's some mixed precedents here in terms of what we could see. But again, U.S. officials highly concerned that it could happen any moment now.
So, Ian, how are Ukrainians reacting to all of this and the escalating tensions?
Yeah, I mean, I think you are seeing a ramping up of that sense of this is something that they're absolutely having to deal with. I think the challenge for President Zelensky is he sees in the Kremlin a policy of trying to sow disinformation in the country, to try and turn Ukrainians against each other, to try and unsettle people and make them nervous, potentially to cause a run on the dollar, people rushing to the banks to try and withdraw what hard currency that they have, a run on the local currency, rather. So, you know, he's going to the nation every few days to try and reassure them that everything is okay. But, of course, they want more support from the American military. I mean, we were out on the front lines with General Pavliuk, who commands 50,000 troops on the Eastern Front. He was very clear that the best deterrent against any further Russian aggression would be more weapons from America. So these weapons we're seeing coming in, not just from the US, from other NATO countries, are absolutely welcome here. They see themselves in the future, perhaps, as part of NATO. That's certainly not what Russia wants.
In panel, Connor Finnegan. Thank you, gentlemen. Coming up, Justice Breyer is set to retire from the Supreme Court. When we come back, who President Biden could nominate to fill that seat. Welcome back. So glad you're streaming with us today. You know, Justice Stephen Breyer is retiring after nearly 3 decades on the Supreme Court. President Biden is expected also to announce his retirement today and mark that selection of his replacement. Biden has promised to nominate the first black woman to the high court. Let's bring in ABC News senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer for more on this, his legacy and how this nomination process could play out. You know, Devin, I just keep going back to you and me talking about the conversation you had with Breyer, and I would on a regular basis come and ask you if you had the scoop. And yesterday you knew it was happening, and you're the one that had the last really deep conversation with him. And so, you know, what does his retirement mean now for the nation?
Well, last conversation, at least as far as we know here at ABC News, and it was a very special occasion a year or so ago in his chambers. You know, we're learning now, Kira, that this is a justice who was trying to bow out as gracefully and apolitically as possible, and that's something that Justice Breyer has made the calling card of his career on the Supreme Court, avoiding politics, trying to build up the public's confidence in its judiciary at a time of extraordinary polarization. That is going to be his legacy, even if he didn't quite achieve it on the bench. And I think immediately with his replacement now, the nation's going to be braced for a much more partisan, divided, younger Supreme Court. Just in the past 6 years, 4 new members, almost half the court has changed over. That's significant. Haven't seen that since Nixon, Kira. So a lot of change coming to this Supreme Court.
Mentioned that President Biden has promised to nominate the first black woman to the Supreme Court. The front runner is believed to be Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. You talked about this yesterday. What do we know about her? Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive.
Yeah, she's a remarkable woman, one of the highest-ranking African-American female federal judges in the country. She's now on the U.S. Court of Appeals in D.C. She was nominated, of course, by President Biden, confirmed by the Senate just in June, and it drew some Republican support. 3 Republican senators voted for her, including Lindsey Graham. She's a former clerk to Justice Breyer. That's a big plus. She has an Ivy League pedigree. She's a mom. She's very charismatic and has talked about her ability to balance work and life. And something else, Kira, about her, she has been committed for years to prison reform, sentencing reform. She served on the U.S. Sentencing Commission and also spent some time as a public defender. So this is a woman who also has some experience in these issues in lower courts and presenting before courts that I think Democrats will find quite appealing.
And clearly she and the other names that are on the short list are pretty amazing. But when it comes down to it, what type of significance, as we look at these 4 top women candidates here, could nominating a black woman to the high court have? I mean, just the impact of this.
Yeah, it is. This is a remarkable moment, and it's hard to overstate it. Certainly, the politics for the White House are significant. The president, of course, suffering in the polls, so he could use a boost here. This is delivering on a big promise. But for these women, for African-American women in this country, for all Americans, this will be a historic moment. Kira, there are more than 700 federal judges in our system. Just 39 of them are black women, a remarkably small number. The president has been diversifying the federal bench, but you look at our short list here, Leandra Kruger, a very distinguished state Supreme Court justice, Leslie Abrams Gardner, the sister of Stacey Abrams, someone who has come up through the ranks, and J. Michelle Childs, a favorite of Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, someone who is a former state Labor Department official, also a non-Ivy League background, could bring a different perspective to the bench. So there are a lot of these very top-notch candidates that the president's going to be looking at. We know that the president has a list. He told us earlier in the year that he is building his list, and now those interviews will begin in earnest, Kira.
It's going to be a big day today. We look forward to that announcement around 12:30 Eastern Time with the president. Thank you so much, Devin. Coming up, the battle that could end up splitting up the city of Atlanta. It's a move that's plaguing virtually all American cities when we start talking about violent crime and solutions for that. Welcome back to ABC News Live. Well, law enforcement officers have been struggling to counter the violent crime that's just plaguing cities across the country. And for Atlanta, this could lead to its breakup. And that's because many residents in its wealthiest neighborhood have just simply had enough. But is that enough to actually succeed? And what does it say about us that some think it's better to part ways than fight challenges altogether? Senior national correspondent Steve Osunsami has that story for us.
It's another busy night in Atlanta.
Get on the ground!
Where the crime is getting in the way of sleep.
Put your hands up! Get on the ground! On the ground!
They're calling it a COVID crime wave.
He's got a gun! Let me see your hands!
With more violence and more thieves.
Get out!
They're splitting that gold one, still doing donuts, though.
On the weekends, for example, police here are busy trying to keep up with wannabe race car drivers with nothing better to do. Seen here blocking the road to a hospital emergency room. The problems are absolutely city and nationwide, but for many who live in Buckhead, the wealthiest neighborhood in town, this rising crime has become grounds for divorce from the city. Do you feel that the city of Atlanta cares about your safety in Buckhead right now?
Absolutely not.
Eliana Kovich is a healthcare worker who lives in the neighborhood and says she's all for a new effort to carve out a piece of Atlanta and start their own new city with their own police.
I've lived in Buckhead in a long time, and for the past year and a half, I've been terrified everywhere I go.
She says she started feeling this way after this terrifying evening with her boyfriend at a Mercedes dealership nearly 2 years ago.
Around 9 o'clock at night, we just went grocery shopping, and we were dropping off his car for a service appointment the next morning, and we were literally waiting on our Lyft driver to just come pick us up. And then this person approached us.
You can see them in this surveillance video that police collected in the investigation where they're under attack by a man with a knife. Police say that he was a repeat offender who was arrested just days earlier in another county and was already back out on the streets.
You just being a white record that homie.
How injured were you each?
We both had concussions.
I'm assuming in that moment you worried that this was where your life was going to end at that night.
Yeah, I thought he was going to kill us both or rape me or something.
It's the kind of story that Bill White likes to share. He's the leader of the Buckhead City movement. They've already raised nearly $2 million.
Ambassador.
With donations from as far away as Australia and Bangladesh. They're trying to bring the issue to a vote this November, and only the people who would live in the boundaries of the new city would get to decide.
When somebody is shot on a jog on Saturday here on West Wesley Road, or someone is shot shopping at Home Depot on a Sunday afternoon in the Garden Center,
Getting off of Windsor Street.
Fast and Furious live on the Buckhead streets, people say enough is enough.
But these are also Buckhead streets. High-end stores, country clubs. Elton John has a home here, Oprah used to, and Justin Bieber was famously house hunting. These streets just aren't that mean, and that's according to police who report that overall crime in the neighborhood was down last year. The Buckhead people are right that violent crime is indeed higher, but it's still a fraction of what's happening in other neighborhoods.
You know, one of the hard things that I have to do is address the perception and what people feel as it relates to crime.
And even if this part of town left, it's not like they could put up a wall.
Absolutely.
Go over here.
On the other end of Atlanta, Glenda Mack is offended by all this worry over Buckhead.
A bunch of well-to-do people who think they're just so entitled, just so entitled. And here our little communities, you know, we hear this gunshots all the time.
Police still don't know who killed her 12-year-old grandson, seen here on her front porch shortly before he was murdered nearly a year ago. The family searched for the boy themselves, and when they found his body, he had been shot 9 times.
Do you need an ambulance? Somebody shot you. Yes, somebody shot you.
Everybody like David.
His grandmother says she takes comfort in this cell phone video from a few years ago, where he's wishing her a happy birthday.
Happy birthday to a lady who is worth more than gold.
You hear the complaints about crime in Buckhead, and it sounds to me like you don't understand what they're talking about over there.
I don't understand it. That's all I could hear when I came here. Buckhead. They kind of ignore the rest of us.
It is not unusual for rural or even suburban communities that don't belong to a city to join up with one. My own neighborhood in suburban Atlanta did just that. But it is unusual for a neighborhood to leave a city, and those kind of fights usually end up in court. And nearly every major city in America has a Buckhead. The residents here are only about 20% of the city's people, but they cover about 40% of the city's bills.
It is a significant amount of the tax base. For these reasons, this would be a destabilizing movement for the city of Atlanta as a whole.
Even the Republican lieutenant governor believes it could hurt the region if Buckhead left the big city.
I think businesses would look negatively upon the separation of those two areas. And I think it would actually make the crime issue worse.
The man who's the face of this new movement is a wealthy fundraiser who only moved to Atlanta about 3 years ago from New York. Bill White will tell you that he doesn't tick your usual boxes. For example, he moved here with his husband. And here's Aretha Franklin singing at their wedding. He's donated money to politicians on both the left and the right. And he reluctantly admits that he was famously here at Hillary Clinton's election party in 2016 before heading across town later that night to celebrate with the real winners of the vote.
And this event...
The people fighting against him say that he just wants to hurt Atlanta because it's run by liberals, and that he's carrying a torch for conservatives still trying to deny the truth about the last presidential election. Essentially, do you believe that Joe Biden rightfully won the election here in Georgia?
Yeah, I think that's a trick question because I don't think it's relative to Buckhead City. I think absolutely we are focused on fighting crime, getting our garbage picked up, paying less taxes.
Many believe he's targeting Atlanta because it's largely African American. Those feelings were underlined when he reposted and then deleted these comments on social media from a website that features prominent white nationalists. People were asking, why was he following their account in the first place?
Bill White is a racist. Bill White has said racist things. He's done racist things. He has consorted with other racists who are saying and doing racist things. And in the context of Buckhead separating itself from Atlanta, he's engaged in a project that is fundamentally racist.
His critics say that it's no accident that the residents of a new Buckhead city would be more than 70% white, surrounded by the birthplace of Dr. Martin Luther King, that until recently was majority black. White says in no way is he or this movement racist. People have called you racist.
Yes, they have.
People have called the people who support you racist, right? You've definitely heard that.
Who are African American and who are African American businessmen, people. It's the wrong thing to say because, you know, calling somebody racist for wanting to lower your taxes and get crime under control is very interesting to me.
Thank you for that question.
Atlanta's new mayor says he's working overtime with the support of the business community to keep his city together.
I'm fighting this tooth and nail, making sure I go out every single day.
We caught up with him right after he opened a new police precinct in the neighborhood he's trying to keep.
What would Buckhead leaving do to the city of Atlanta?
Yeah, what Buckhead leaving, this divorce of Buckhead from Atlanta will be an unnecessarily expensive one for both spouses in this divorce. We have a lot of parks and things that are city-owned property. It's going to cost them. It's going to be alimony if this happens.
The issue is now at the Georgia State House, where the majority of lawmakers are Republican and are often cheered at home for throwing elbows at the city where they work. And it must be said that not a single state lawmaker who represents Buckhead or the rest of Atlanta is for this. If they let this get to a vote this fall, again, state law says only people in the neighborhood get to decide. Eliana Kovich believes her neighbors would vote to leave. And Glenda Mack across town says that sadly she believes they would too.
You can't just focus on one place. And that's what I want everyone to know.
And our Steve Osunsami joining me now live from Atlanta. I tell you what, Steve, Glenda Mack pulls at my heartstrings.
You know, she was a very powerful interview. You know, she underlines that, you know, lots of people across town have frustrations with the crime that's happening here. And it is almost a year ago to the day that her grandson was killed, and police still haven't found her, the murderer. And this incident, the murder, the shooting, happened just outside a police precinct in Atlanta in her part of town.
It's a shame. And, you know, Steve, just listening to Bill White, someone who I've interviewed in the past as well, you know, of course, he denies being racist, but it's hard to ignore the history of Atlanta and the demographics in that area. Let's just talk about the significance of a role that race clearly plays in this issue, Steve.
Well, it plays a significant role, and I want to underline something for people watching this right now. You know, I have lived in this town for going on 25 years. You and I go way back when you used to live here.
Do.
You lived here for a number of years, right? You know,
yes.
your children were born here, if I have that right.
Absolutely.
You know,
I loved
know,
Atlanta and the history.
Yes, we both know this issue. We know this city. We know that this is the birthplace of Dr. Martin Luther King, the city that is too busy to hate, a city that is largely and has long been majority African American, that has succeeded in so many ways with a black leadership. And so having one of the whitest parts of town leave this city does, of course, bring up the issues of race. And, you know, when you look at the city of Atlanta is about 50% of the city's African American, but the Buckhead population is 77.5% white, 11% black, 6% Asian, 7% Hispanic. So in the conversation here, race has certainly become an issue. And, you know, if we're being absolutely honest, there is a small segment of the population that is for this Buckhead city that is conservative, Republican, and has no qualms about, frankly, sticking it to the city of Atlanta simply because it is largely African American and run by Democrats. So race absolutely plays a significant role. However, I would underline that the bigger issue is money, and that the color that is really the underlying issue here is green. Because what you have in this part of town is a 20% of the city's population that covers about 40% of the city's budget. And there are many people, black, white, whatever color, who feel that they should be getting more of their money's worth. And that's also happening here, Kira.
Steve, we will continue this conversation. It's an important one. We want to talk about healing the divide there, and also we'll follow to see if indeed this resolution passes. Right along with you, national correspondent Steve Osunsami from Atlanta for us. Thank you so much, Steve.
You're very welcome.
I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks for joining us. The news continues here on ABC News Live with all the context and analysis. I'll see you back here tomorrow. And starting next week, I'll be joining you live with ABC News Live's news show at 1 p.m. Eastern. I hope you'll join us. We're excited about that. Have a great rest of your day.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.